The Weekly Harvest, an in-depth look at the Brandon Wheat Kings and the WHL.
Washman trying to come up with it for Allison. Here's Allison right in front. He scores!
Brandon Junior hockey fans, you've waited 2 decades for this. In the league's 50th anniversary, your Wheat Kings are the champions.
And we are live. Hey, how you doing? My name is Chris Falko. He is Brandon Crowe. And look at that at the bottom of our screen. That is Mr. Brian Propp. We are going to get into introductions more momentarily, but welcome to the Weekly Harvest podcast. Broadcasting live once again Monday night. But if you happen to be downloading this on Tuesday after lunch, traditional podcast means we appreciate that as well. So we're going to get right into this. Brandon, we have been talking about this for a while, trying to get, people have been harassing us as the younger guys, being like, you don't get any of the classic legends. We want to hear from somebody, from back in the day. Well, when you want to talk about a name who's either at the top of every list across the history books, then we've pretty much got that one covered tonight. We got Brian Propp. Brian, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. How's everybody doing? Hopefully it's nice out, and I think you said it was windy and a little cold.
Yeah, but people right now, if they could still go to the rink and watch some playoff hockey right now, I don't think they'd be complaining. But the fact that they're stuck at home and have nothing else to do, that's when the complaints come flying in. I got to start, Brian, and I wanted to get this off my chest. I started in the SJHL as well, and I don't know if you've seen it, but they've got a big mural of you up in the new rink in Melville now, a nice hand-painted mural from your time in Melville. The points and the record, that just had to be easy for you, didn't it? 150 some points. You still have the record. Just touch on that a little bit. How did you put up so many points in a rookie year in Melville?
So at that time I was 15 years old, and I lived in Neudorf, which is about a 20-mile drive to Melville. And so I couldn't drive, so my parents had to drive me all the time to practice, and we got some rides every once in a while. At that time, it was the coach was Jerry Jones, and so at that time he was ahead of the curve because he played football and hockey. He won 2 Stanley Cup in Toronto, and he won a Grey Cup. And so I think that by playing football, he had the plays set up, and so that really helped us with the team. Knowing where to go, call out the numbers, just right. The plays that we needed, and Plus, I had with the other goalie, the players were there. Players were good, like Turman and Dean were my line mates. So at that time, I was just having fun, and I still don't remember the goal, the games, and things like that.
That's a long time ago now.
It's fun for me, but yeah. And since I was, from Melville, and my dad was a Lutheran minister, so my dad visited a lot of people in hospitals in Melville at that time.
So you go from that incredible rookie season, and it does not slow down once you get to Brandon. Now, you come in, and right away you join some very talented folks along the way. We're going to talk, I'm sure, in depth about a couple of them, but what was your first impression of the Wheat City? Who were some of the first players that you remember meeting when you came here for the Wheat Kings?
That was, I went to camp when I was in Melville, and so Brad McCrimmon knew that he was going to go there, and Ray Allison was there the year before. So I was able to talk with them and know that I was going to go to Brandon at that time. And to this day, I'm still really good friends with Brad and Ray. And unfortunately, Brad died almost 8 years ago in a plane crash. But he was a leader. But at that time, it was all about Dunk McCollin was the coach, and Durlago was there, and we had a powerful team. And so that was a good start for me. Just by being there for that year.
It was certainly a cool time in Brandon's history. They had some ups and downs, and that kind of career path you went on, the success you had individually and team success, certainly that had to make your time just that much more fun.
Well, we won all the time. I remember the first season we only lost 12 games. The second season we only lost 8 games, and my last season we only lost 5 games that whole season, which is
Wow.
pretty amazing when you think about it. So we were used to winning all the time, and at that time it was a 20-year-old draft. So like the players are a little older at that time, and then the NHL merged in the 90 70 79, and so they started to take 18-year-old drafts. So that's why Laurie Boschman got drafted before me and Bork. He went to Toronto on the eighth pick. But so it was all good. But again, I played with some really good lines and players, and I still remember a lot of them, and it just was so much fun. Winning all the time helps a lot.
Do you remember your billet family in Brandon?
I do. One was a scout for Dietrin was his name, and my last 2 years I was with Larry and Ellen Daycock, right on 13th Street, and so I didn't have a car, so I had to walk everywhere. At that time, Brad McCrimmon had a car; he was rich, and so I got some rides with him.
So you mentioned that you knew Brad from your time before you even came with the Wheat Kings. Was your first introduction to Kelly then, was that not until the 78-79 season when he came to play with his rookie season during your last year?
Yes, so that was good too. But also like with Brad, we both played. He played in Print PA, and I played for the Melville Millionaires. So we knew we hated each other. And then when we went to the Brandon, then we really liked how we ended up.
Certainly, the players on those rosters. There were so many guys that went on to have great pro careers. You touched on some of the guys you stayed in contact with. I imagine that group, because of all the winning, stayed pretty tight all the way through your guys' kind of adult years and into having kids and families and that sort of thing. Would that be the case?
Yeah, definitely. And because I had a 15-year career and played another year in France, and then I did the radio for 9 years for the Philadelphia Flyers. I knew a lot of scouts and coaches that were still in the league, and by playing with Brandon, Hanlon was the goalie at that, and Semenko was there. We had a couple other guys that were really good, Dan Bonner, and and Gillen and Patrick, and you talk about all the good players. Knickel, Olsen was there, the goalies, and but it was nice because we had a tough team. At that time, we didn't lose too many fights because Semenko was there, and Derlago was unbelievable. Like if he didn't get hurt that one year, he could have scored 120 goals that year.
So now, after you leave, you actually cross paths with a number of Wheat Kings throughout your pro career. You were on a number of teams, and I'm trying to do the whole web, and I kind of lost count. But I'm sure there's some stories along the ways there as well of you playing with former teammates in the show.
Yeah. So like after a couple of years, like Ray Allison got drafted to be in Hartford, and he played with Gordie Howe. And then he went to the Flyers in 82 and 83. And so I played a couple of years with him. And then Brad McCrimmon got traded to Philadelphia in the early 80s. And so that time, that was so much good for me because we were good friends. And at that time, Mark Howe and McCrimmon were two of the best D in the league. The plus minus was out of this way. And then so, just nice to have good friends with them. And then by me playing 11 years with the Philadelphia Flyers and then stopping for a month and then in the playoffs at Boston and then signing with Minnesota for 3 years and then ended up in Hartford, it was, really good for my career just to be long as I did.
You had a great experience. A lot of guys, they'll remember their first NHL game. They'll remember what city they were in. They probably remember the finer details, what they had pregame or what hotel they were in. but you go an extra step and you score the game winner in your first game. Is that correct? Now, I think the goalie was pretty good goalie too, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was Bill Smith from the Islanders. Yeah, so at that time, I started with Reggie Leach and and Bob Clark as a line, and then after 20 games, like I moved back to Bill Barber and Clark and Leach, who were powerful, and then I went to Kenny Linsman and Paul Holmgren. But yeah, I remember the first game, like I scored the game-winning goal, had an assist, and I thought, this is the way it's going to be, like in Brandon, like we win all the time. And so that year, the second game, I remember that vividly, because we lost 9-2 in Atlantic, and I was like, oh my God, is this what it's going to look like in the NHL? Because I didn't lose that much, and then we went 35 without a loss after that in my rookie season.
That's an impressive run.
That's not bad.
Of course, yeah. And then we went to the finals my first year, because at that year it was number 1 against number 16. So that's why it ended up being the Flyers against the Islanders, because you placed different teams in by number 1 against 16, and then so forth. So
and you had a couple of tastes at the international level, of course, the World Juniors. And then the Spengler Cup and a couple of Canada Cups as well. We did get a question on Twitter. The first question that popped up was a fantastic question from Michael Clark, and I think you saw it on Twitter. Is there any truth to the fact that it was you that passed the puck to Mario in OT of Game 2, but Gretzky got credit on the score sheet? Is that true? And have you ever said anything to Wayne about stealing that point from you?
Yeah, well, I knew it, but it didn't matter to me, because we won, and because we needed to force a Game 3, and otherwise it would have been very disappointing, because just getting a chance to play in the 3-game series in 87 was unbelievable, because at that time the Russians weren't drafted, so it was like they were playing in the Olympics for every tournament, and every score was 6-5, and we lost the first game and then won the game 6-2, and then we won 6-5 with a minute left. But I'll remember that for as long as I live, because at least I won a cup, the Canada Cup, and with the two of the best players in the world at that time. It was sort of like the Olympics of today, I think. The speed was outstanding, and the players were great. But I remember that it's all about the great leaders that we had. Gretzky, from young on, like he was a leader. And, Lemieux, I played on the line with both of them most of the tournament. And I just told them, hey, listen, I'll take care of defense, and you guys just pass me the puck, and then we'll get some points and then win. But a lot of people in the history of Canada probably think that the 87 Canada Cup series of a 3-game series against Russia was one of the best all time.
I'm not going to get an argument from me with that one, Brian, at all. Do you remember your feeling when you were named to that team?
Well, at that time, I was the oldest player on the team for Team Canada. And that was the year, like in 87, we lost to the Edmonton games in 7 games. So I was already in the 3 Stanley Cup finals, and then the tournament started in October or August or September. So I still was in shape, and because of my stats in the playoffs, I was a second later scorer. I scored 28 points in the playoffs that year, and Keenan was there, and then we had a couple other guys from the Flyers that were on the team. So I think that they looked at my experience, and they felt that I was a good choice. But I wasn't afraid of them. I played with them, Gretzky, at the same time when I started in '79, and he's known me all his life, and then. Lemieux was part of it, and then Bork and Coffey and Messier, Anderson, Gartner, Howard Chuck, Gilmer, all of the best players in the world were there. So it was good about the leadership. At that time, I was one of the oldest guys, and so like they learned from me too.
That's that roster again. You said kind of like the Olympics. I mean, that roster then that was Canada's best at any point in history. You'd have a hard time arguing that roster wasn't one of the best rosters ever. I got to ask. I mean, I obviously people in Brandon, and I think you might agree with this, and you probably started this along with Ron Hextall, but there's a lot of people in Brandon that slowly became Philadelphia Flyer fans after all of the Viking connections. And of course, you had the Bobby Clark and the Reggie Leach connections and the Flin Flon Bombers and everything. And of course, they had the attitude as the Broad Street Bullies. And was playing in Philadelphia, were the fans really as nuts and as wild as the stories go from back in the day, where if you were a visiting player, you had to hurry in quickly from the parking lot because the fans were that nuts for the Flyers back in the day?
Well, it was more because we had such a tough team. Like we had Ben Wilson, Bridgen, we had Dave Brown, we had Stanley, Cochran, we had all the tougher players, and so of course everyone hated to play in the Spectrum because we were so tough on them. But we also knew how to win, and we had balanced lines, so we were able to be competitive every time. And at home, we didn't lose that much, but it was because we had the tough team, so nobody messed with us. And like the fans were, they knew that we were tougher than other players, and so like they know that they're not going to have a chance to win, and a lot of those players were kind of scared.
It was a bad place for visiting teams to go, I can only imagine.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then you had a chance to play in the Boston Garden for a handful of games as well. Is there any comparison at all between the two, or is Philadelphia take the cake?
Well, Boston was different because it was a smaller rink, and at that time they were the number one in the league. We got traded to the Flyers, Dave Poulin got there in February. That year, I had a hand injury, so I missed 25 games. I had a artery in my hand was operated on, and so my artery was taken out, and so it took me a long time to heal. And but after that, and to get traded to Boston, which is number one in the league, it was nice to Bobby Clark just to kind of give me the chance to play in another final. And then he got fired, and he went to Minnesota, and we went to another final. So for me, it was kind of tough. It's nice to win as many times as I have in the finals. Of course, I didn't win a Stanley Cup, but who cares? I mean, I was there every time. And they have to make sure that they can recognize that too. And but yeah, it was Boston was it was different, but they had tough teams too. So and they Bork was there. What a player he was, and Neely and Janney were my line mates, and so I fit right in with them. We went into the finals, and we lost in triple overtime in Boston the first game, which really hurt. And then and of course Edmonton was Stanley Cup winners for so many years, so they knew how to kind of play it a little better. And unfortunately, we didn't win it that year either.
Let's jump in the time machine here, quick second there, Brian. Let's go back again to that 1979 season, because you mentioned about the losses. I mean, that's still a record that stands to this day. Like, that was the greatest WHL team that has ever been iced, that may ever be iced, that's still to be beaten. Let's go back to that year again, and we've talked about some of the players that you've played alongside, but more so I want to talk about the game that Brad McCrimmon, it's almost an infamous game in the Mem Cup where he didn't leave the ice. That's kind of where he sort of got the nickname Beast. I know he earned that nickname early in his career just by his playing style, but can you kind of just tell that story?
Yeah, well, that was it was in Vernon, and it was like was supposed to be in Montreal, but they were in the playoffs that year, so we had to change the game into Verdun, which is not like Montreal. Otherwise, it might have been helped us because of the bigger ice and the better ice. It could have helped us, but still, it was it was a great game, and overtime, and I think Brad had to leave because he had a penalty. But yeah, I think
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, that was only 2 minutes
both.
he was off. Yeah.
Yeah, he could have. I think he played he played a little. He had a couple of breaks. He didn't play the whole game. Otherwise, he'd be fall over. But I remember it was I scored the one goal and then had a chance to get the second goal, and the goalie made a good save, but it was just. But yeah, it was very tough for us to lose. We worked so hard to get there. But Peter was a good team too, and but the goalies were pretty good, and it was quite a tournament anyway.
Things have changed from then till now. Travel wise, it's probably a little nicer. I mean, when I crawl aboard the bus, there's nice reclining seats, and we got DVD players and everything else that comes along with it. But I imagine that travel back in the day, sure, there weren't the teams quite as far away and spread apart as they are now. But to touch on it a little bit, what was life like on the bus back in the late 70s?
Yeah, well, we had to put the seats back and kind of break them so that we could have some foam and things like that. And it was always cold on the windows, and not to music. The one thing was that Dunk kind of gave us some beer for long trips, and so we had Brad McCrimmon take care of the beer so that they could share it with the other guys. Because at that time it was long trips to go. At that time, like Winnipeg was there, but then they left, and then Flin Flon was that was a trip. That was I can't believe we didn't die those trips. And then Regina and then Saskatoon was the closest after that. But yeah, we spent a lot of time on the bus, and we played some cards and just talked about hockey, and it became us. We were much closer than a lot of other teams on the East, because they're so used to, knowing the press and, staying at home that much. And, so we were tougher. That's for sure. The Western guys were tougher.
I think that still resonates to this day.
Yeah. And I think that probably when they moved the draft to an 18-year-old draft, it started to change, and the rules have changed a lot the last few years. And so now they're probably 16 and 17-year-olds, and they're not mature enough yet. So it's kind of tough to find a good team and just try to make sure that you have good teams together. But I loved the teams that we had with Brandon because we were close, and of course Dunk McCollin, he taught us how to be good pros. He practiced us hard, and he knew how to treat us all as players to get ready for the NHL. And that last year, we had 10 guys that were drafted into the league that year. 10 guys.
Wow. You know what? That style that you used to describe too, that's exactly how a lot of people have described what Dave Lowry does, minus the giving the boys beers on the bus. That's very much a 1970s hockey move. But the way you describe that is, if you treat these young players, they're junior players, but if you treat them with respect, treat them like pros, that's how you help get them ready for that next level.
Well, that's what coaching does. I mean, especially at that age, they're still learning, and they just have to take advantage of it. And as I tell all the people, I used to practice as hard as I'd play, just like Bob Clark, and led by example. And you had to learn by that, because I love getting on the ice, and that's why I scored as much as I did, because I hated missing the net. So everybody that practices just knows that they have to try to hit the net and think about where they're going to be for practice, and put your brain to work so that you can think about what you have to do, and you work hard and think about where you have to be, and it makes a big difference. And physically, it was great, but mentally, we had sports psychologists that taught us how to think better. There's ways that you can do so that you can get much better. it's just like me with my stroke almost 5 years ago. I couldn't talk, I couldn't walk. I still have problem with my right hand and side, and I still have aphasia. So sometimes the words get mixed up around every once in a while because of my stroke. And this month it happens to be a stroke month, and so I'm working with another company called Bancroft that has brain injury and stroke people. So it's a good month for me to have you guys on.
Yeah, and I wanted to, I wasn't quite sure how to bring it up, and I know you've been very vocal with it, telling your story and everything that went along with it. Now, I have to go back and ask, do you think, or has anybody told you that, maybe injuries that you sustained while playing led to this, or have your doctor said this is just kind of the way your cards were dealt to you? How did that all get described to you once you went through it?
So like I knew I had AFib after I was a player and finished playing. So AFib in your heart, you kind of murmur and things like that, but it can make a difference. And so about 10 years before, I had a surgery for an ablation, it's called, to kind of make the heart a little bit not react as much. And so after 6 months, my medication kind of wore off. And so I thought I wasn't in AFib, but I probably was. And so what happened after years, I didn't have medication. And so I ended up with AFib. So what happened is on vacation with my family in September 2015, and I didn't feel well that night. And so I went to bed early and I had a really bad headache. And then I fell out of bed at the middle of the night. I lost a couple of teeth. All those years playing hockey, I never lost any teeth. And I couldn't talk. I couldn't move. Thankfully, my son and daughter were there, so we got to the hospital pretty fast. But it took me a year and a half to get much better with speech therapy, physical therapy, and occupational therapy. But just to tell to all the people that know or don't know, it's all about hope and how you can work and how you can react. And I just talked with a guy that had a stroke today. He's still struggling from his stroke. And I talk a lot of these people and give them hope and tell them not to give up and be positive. And your brain takes a long time to heal, and you have to take your time and always look for something to get better.
Certainly a crazy, sequence of events. And, I know a lot of people in Brandon were following along and, we're so glad to see you get recovered to the point where you are now. Have you played hockey since? Are you able to jump on the ice in the old men's beer league, or do you stay away from the skates? How have you been able to recover that way?
Well, the last 2 months we're not allowed to on the ice because
Right.
of virus. But I think that, yes, I have been skating the last 3.5 years with a group of guys that I know. So we skate Wednesday and Friday mornings in South Jersey, Pennsauken Skate Zone. We usually skate from 7 to 8:30, full equipment, two goalies, 5-on-5, a couple subs, and it's good because it's invite only. So, and then the guys are getting a little older now. So they're between 40 and 60. And we started, it was 20 to 40. Now they're not, it's no hit and invite only. So, and all the same guys are there. Like some guys play for the NHL, like Andre Faust played for the Flyers, and Ray Ellison and Fridge, Todd Fedoric a couple times. It's good for me because I can't shoot that much because my fingers don't work. But the goalies I played against, they're not that good, so I can score and still really good. Oh.
You can still celebrate the way you used to,
Oh
though.
yeah, right in their face. Yeah, I love skating, scoring goals. That's for sure.
Now, if I asked Ron Hextall right now if you scored on him lots in practice, would he deny it?
No, he wouldn't, because he knows that I love to skate against, score against him. I used to drive him crazy because he hated when I put the puck in the net, and so he used to fire the puck at me a couple times when I was doing the radio for the Flyers. I skated when he was still playing, and I went back and forth, and I scored in the middle of the net, two sides, and he got upset, and then he fired a puck at me, and so like I said, oh well, I got to be careful because I don't want him to be upset. But I just had a chance. It was his birthday a couple days ago, and so I texted him, and now he kind of lives in Florida and the Poconos in PA. So I had a chance to wish him a happy birthday. And but yeah, I'll never forget what he did after Chelios ran him, because he was sticking up for my team, and especially for me after the Chelios hurt. And so I'll never forget that. It was a great lesson for me just to be a leader and to see how it meant for him to do what he did.
I never really put the connection together. I'd seen the clip of him kind of, I guess you could say, going bananas or whatever you want to describe it as, but I never really knew the backstory of it. And I read Perry Bergson of the Brandon Sun. He did that alumni piece on you a couple years ago. I read that last night and kind of finally got some background on it. So in all your passing since then, have you ever had a conversation with Chris Chelios? Or if you did, how would that go?
Well, I did because it was in 2011 when Brad McCrimmon died, and he was I went to his funeral in Detroit because he used to play at Detroit, and so his funeral was there. So Chelios was there with a couple of other friends, and so I was able to talk with him and to say, hey, listen, after time, I still hate you, but we could be fine, be nice with each other, and put everything behind you. And why worry about the rest of your life? I almost died 5 years ago, so I'm happy every day in my life now. I'm happy and positive, and I don't worry about what I used to do. It's just about life and how it treats you.
So I want to ask you about the infamous photo, Brian. There is, and there's no argument that the top line in Wheat King history, it's Propp, Allison, Derlego. And there is that iconic shot of the three of you without your buckets, all stopping at the same time, and you with that flow. And I think we even used it in the promo for this. What was it like playing along those two? Because that's got to be the most dominant line in, if not Wheat King history, in WHL history as well.
Yeah. So we took pictures, and I think I had a back eye or something. I must have got a stick in the eye or something. So I had to look a little tougher. But long hair. I used to have perms every once in a while in the 80s, and so that was kind of crazy. Now it's a little different. Now I'm a little better. But and to play with those three guys, it was, again, by being the bus as much as we were. We roomed together, and especially Flin Flon. Like the three of us had a room, and I had a cot. So we had to kind of get close together by that. And I'll never forget. And Ray is a really good friend of mine to this day. He still works in Cherry Hill, which is next to where I'm living, and he just moved to Myrtle Beach. He's gonna retire in a couple of months in Myrtle Beach. But I still talk with him all the time, and a bunch of my other guys that I know talk about all the time. And Derlego, I've seen him a couple of times in Toronto alumni games over years, and so I've had a chance to talk with him too. But what a great time we had! Bill was so talented; he was unbelievable, and. And Ray, he worked the corners, and I did too. But Ray just kind of fought for us and did all the dirty work, and we kind of got all the good glory.
I think one of the really cool things when you look at the Brandon Wheat Kings and the way they've developed not only players but people in the hockey world. Of course, you've got equipment managers, you've got trainers, you've got guys like Craig Heisinger in Winnipeg, and Darren Granger, the equipment manager in LA, and then of course Kelly McCrimmon in Vegas, and at one point you had Ron Hextall, and all of these people that have gone on to work in hockey. Is that kind of like when you run into one of those guys, is that kind of the first place the conversation goes? Was that, hey, you know what, we were all in the same boat one day in a small town in southern Manitoba?
Oh yeah, well, especially at that time we didn't know any better. I know that I grew up in Saskatchewan, and we had to work in the farms all the time, and we still had to work for a living in the summers. And I remember that, like, it wasn't like it is now, like the getting drafted. Like I found out by form. I was on a forum working that day, and I got a call from the Philadelphia Flyers. I got drafted. I was like, oh, okay, that's okay, nice, But it changed so much now. But where we were in the West, we didn't find out more about what was going on. Like the East, like they had the press and things like that. I didn't really worry about that. I know that when we were in Brandon, Knickel, the goalie, he followed all the hockey news, and so I heard every once in a while about the hockey news, and so like a couple of these guys knew that. But where we were, it was more about us playing for each other and winning and having fun, and you know that was then. Now it's completely different. Now I think a lot of players play for stats, and you keep track of the hits and the takeaways, and who knows, it's just still you still have to learn how to score the goal and make sure that you win for the team.
Certainly the analytics side of things have really changed things. I can't imagine if Dunk McCollum had the same tools that Dave Hackstall and all the late coaches the Flyers now had. You guys might not have been able to be running free like the horses you were. He'd have had all these probably stats guys telling you were in the wrong spot, or statistically you should have been somewhere else. But I just don't think that would have worked for you guys back then.
No, and in the '80s, like with Bob Clark and his group, like I played with him for 5 years, and we went to the finals in '80, and at that time, we drank a lot of beer, but we hung together, and that makes it nice. And then the coaches let you alone. Like I remember Pat Quinn, my first coach. He said, "Hey, listen, this guy's quiet. Like he didn't say much the first 2 years, but he speaks with his stick." And he said, "Hey, I'll give him some beer if he wants. I'll buy it for you. Just how you did it." But then it changes in the '90s and the 2000s. It's changed a lot. Now, when we were in the '80s, we always had beer in the fridge after games, and then when a couple goalies died, like Pelle Lundberg died in '85, then we had to take that away. But it was just changing at that time, and it was the '90s changed a little bit more, and the 2000s are a little different. But for me, I loved '70s and '80s. We had better times. We had good stories. We hung together and we played for each other, and we won a lot.
You got any more, Chris?
I just love this. I'm looking at the time, and we kind of said that we would eat up half an hour of your time, or we're sitting at 40 minutes. But I could keep asking these old school questions, though. Is the problem? Is like
one of the best stories I heard from back in the day was one of my buddies had gone to the Hockey Hall of Fame and was checking out the Montreal Canadiens rebuilt dressing room, and he had taken a picture, and there were ashtrays built into the stalls from back in the day. So that's a different time than you'd find nowadays. I don't think you'd find that.
The beer is like he smoked like 3 packs of cigarettes a day. So but he had the wind, and he was fast and everything. Yeah, it's really changed a lot. But these are all good stories, and it's been really good. And I don't know if you guys have time for me to run over what the guffaw means. Like, so when I went to center ice, I did guffaw. I got it from Howie Mandel, the comedian.
Okay, yeah. Now I've heard this story a little bit, but not to the extent of like why that specific saying from Howie Mandel. Were you a Howie Mandel fan?
Yes, I was. I went to his shores in Atlantic City, and because in Philadelphia, to go to the shore, it's only an hour drive to the casinos. And so I saw his show a few times, but I saw him once with a friend of mine. And so how he did the guffaw for fun, and it means a hearty laughter. And so I was thinking about, hey, this is something that I need when I score in the '80s. And so I want to do something a little different that makes it more excitement and things like that. And so I copied him. And so the first time when I scored a goal at the first start of the season, I went to the guffaw and went to center ice, and I said it. And then Keenan, coach, he said, "What is that? Don't ever do that again." And I said, I didn't say anything, but I I kept going it. And so, but now I branded it. I have my guffaw. It means a hearty laughter. On my Brian Propp website, there's a whole story of how it came apart. And then so I visited Howie in the 80s at his show, after his shows with a bunch of guys. And I still keep in contact with him. I was just at a shore with him 6 months ago in Atlantic City. So I had a chance to talk with him again. And soon I'm going to have my own branded Guffaw cigars. I'm going to be a licensing agreement with Vivente Cigars from the Dominican Republic. So if anybody wants to go to my Brian Propp website, there's a link to buy the cigars. And the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to sell 425 boxes of 10 for about $10, boxes of 10 for about 140 US. But there'll be special edition, limited edition, and they'll make sure that they're really good. And that's what I like. I want to make sure that it's done the right way.
That's awesome. Is there any chance of getting those up in Canada, or is there immigration things with tobacco? I don't know how that works. Because you're going to have Canadian fans asking.
Yeah, but it's for me, it's just me about having a licensing agreement so that I don't have to worry about manufacturing the tobacco. And so I'm just working on a deal where when they get shipped, then depends on whoever buys them. I'll keep track of all the people that are there and see what they want to do about shipping them to Canada.
Right on.
So you mean to tell me that you were trying to have fun in the NHL way back then, and you didn't get called out on it? Because I think certain teams are trying to do stuff like that last couple of years, and it may have got called out on it.
The
Carolina.
The Carolina celebration would probably fall under the guffaw type category, and guys like Brian Burke really don't like that. Did you get any flack other than maybe Mike Keenan?
No, because at that time, it was new, and so I loved doing it, and from that, even when I retired, I ran the Medford Ice Rink in New Jersey for 3 years. And then I taught the young kids, how to skate and I taught them the guffaw. So I told them, hey, if you get good grades and you get an A, then you do a guffaw to your teacher. And then you give them just get them ready to go back to school, because it's more about school. And if you get a scholarship, that helps. But a lot of people don't make it. And so they have to rely on their goal.
So the guffaw was always your right hand or your left hand?
I covered with my left hand, and I went all the way to the right because I carried the stick on this side. And guffaw.
You know what? When I first saw that as your email address, when I got it from Perry, and of course I'd follow you on Twitter, but I just assumed it was an old nickname. I had no idea. But Howie's Canadian, right?
He's Canadian. Yeah.
So definitely. He's a hockey fan.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The big time. Yeah. So like I said, over the years, I've talked with him a few different times, and just with my heart problems and my stroke and things like that, he's got a bad ticker too. So he has to be careful about what he does too. But at that time in the 80s, he had hair. And now he's blonde. He's bald.
I got a message from a big time Wheat King fan last week when we announced you were coming on, and he sent me a picture of a signed Brian Propp jersey, and I said, well, those were the great sweater design. I love those. And he said that during the 40th anniversary season, he bought one, and he bought a Dave Semenko one for his dad. He mailed you the jersey, and you signed it yourself, personalized it, and mailed it back to him, along with some hockey cards, some Canada Cup photos of you and Brad that Brad had signed as well. And he wanted to say that that was an absolute class act move, and you were a favorite of his when he was a kid growing up. So that's cool. Do you still get fan mail from Wheat King fans or from Flyer fans to this day?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like I get email or fan mail every day. I worked for Wolf Commercial Real Estate in New Jersey the last 5.5 years in Marlton, and so they know where to get me. And and I just moved, so a lot of people maybe have the wrong address. But if they want to go to my Wolf commercial real estate address. They can Google that, and then they can go from there. So I usually send pictures to people, pucks and everything. If people want signed things, they can send it to me, and I'll mail it back. And but I usually have pictures all the time with me, and you get signed people for the kids and things like that. That's what I've done my whole life, and I learned that from my dad, who was a minister in Neudorf. I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, so we're all 13 months apart. So we had our own hockey team at that time, and then now they've got kids that have other kids, and so big family. My dad was pretty good about teaching me the leadership and how to play hockey, how to react, how to be a good sport, how to give back, and so I'll never forget that.
I gotta ask. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's like that old joke about what you guys used to do before the internet and technology. And it's like, well, go ask your 8 brothers and sisters. But anyway, go on, Crow.
So on your Elite Prospects page, it has you listed as Lanigan. Now I'm imagining that is that incorrect, or did you have?
No, I was born. When I was 5 years old, my parents lived in Jansen,
Right.
which ends up to be about like 10 minutes from Lanigan. So the hospital was in Lanigan. So I was born in Lanigan, and then I moved to Neudorf when I was 5 years old. And then I went to Melville, and then I went to the Brandon Weekings after that.
So did you ever get a call when you were winding it up to play for the Lanigan Pirates or the Jansen Jets in the old senior hockey circuit?
No, but my dad was a minister. He played hockey there, so like he was known as the dirty minister, dirty Rev, and so because he was a good player, he had a good he played defense, and he had a good hip check, and so he always knew if people wanted to get under his skin, but he didn't back out for anybody, and he took care of his teammates.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, Brian, before we do go, we have to do a little thing that we call make a face. And basically, we just have to get a screen grab for the thumbnail for this video. But because we're talking about the guffaw, I think it's only maybe appropriate that maybe me and Crow try and imitate that, if that's okay, if we're allowed to do that.
Good.
Okay.
All right, count us down, Falco.
All right, here we go. We're all going to do it in 3, 2, 1.
Guffaw!
Oh, Brian, this was awesome. We know we had a lot of fans that were reaching out to us saying we want to hear from some of the older guys, and that's certainly not a knock on you. That's just pointing out how young Chris and I are. I remember, my first Wheat King memories are of Jordan Tutu, so that shows you the age gap between your career and when I started watching. But this is fantastic. We know that everybody still talks about that line, and it'll go down in history as one of the greatest Wheat King, if not Western Hockey League lines of all time. And we know you're busy, probably not as much right now, trying to stay busy, but I want to wish you the best. Stay healthy and stay in touch, and hopefully we'll see you in Brandon maybe sometime soon.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks a lot, Brian. Really appreciate it. There we go. That is Brian Propp. That's fantastic. That's unbelievable. I'm just going to go like that really quick.
Perfect. What a great storyteller.
Unbelievable, Brandon, that we got to sit there and we asked him to join us for half an hour, and he was on with us. How generous for 48 minutes. Like, really generous with his time. That was fantastic. So, great guy, Brian Propp. How about that?
That was fantastic. Now, it's time for the announcement. Next week's guests. Drum roll, please. We go from one generational legend in Brian Propp to another. The highest scoring single season goal scorer in Wheat King history, Ray Ferraro.
Boom.
Also, his current sidekick and former CKLQ radio voice, Darren Drager. The two of them, the hosts of the Ray and Dregs podcast, will join us next Monday live on the Weekly Harvest. So Ray Ferraro and Darren Drager are coming up in 1 week's time. So the hit list of quality guests is just getting better and better, and we're really looking forward to a different generation of storytelling from those two guys.
A couple of guys who know how to actually do a podcast can be joining us to do a podcast, so it's going to be great.
I'm afraid they're going to judge us. they've probably got a way better setup.
I'm hoping that they just kind of take it over and we can just kind of tag along with one of theirs because it's so good. Hey, if you want to send us any questions for next week, if you want to send us any feedback from tonight, the email's up on the screen now if you are watching. It's qweeklyharvest@gmail.com. That's the letter Q, weeklyharvest@gmail.com. You can drop us a line there and get a hold of us. But we'll be live here again next Monday at 8 o'clock with Ray Ferraro, with Darren Drager. That is awesome. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. And again, if you missed any of this, you want to catch up, or even next week can't catch it live, as always, the traditional way, these podcasts still going to be out there Tuesdays around lunch hour. You can download it across all the traditional podcast means or online at qcountryfm.ca as well.
There's also a link at the Wheat King website under the top tabs. You can watch any of the previous ones as well, and there's links there to get to the full page where you can download it and do whatever you need to do, whether you're in your car, you're at your desk, or whatever the case may be. But this was another great week of the Weekly Harvest, episode 17. Next week, 18. It's just getting better and better. And looking forward to next week. Chris, great work this week.
Aaron Bull is already excited for next week. That's
I
good.
think
a lot of people are, honestly. That's going to be good.
I'm excited. Ray Ferraro, I mean, that's a broadcasting legend. Darren Drager was a guy that was in my shoes. Keep an eye out for the picture that we're going to use to promo this. I may have found an original Wheat King program with probably an 18-year-old Darren Drager posing for CKLQ. So look forward to that on Monday. And Chris, enjoy your week. I know fishing season opens this week, so if I don't hear from you Monday, I better come looking for your kayak and your canoe floating maybe upside down in one of the lakes. So if it's just me on Monday, you had a terrible fishing accident.
It opens Friday, but if you were a true fisherman, you know that trout ponds are open all year round. So I was out yesterday, so whatever. I'm still going.
Well, good luck, and we'll talk to you Monday.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you next week in the Weekly Harvest.